Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. It happened on a Thursday night, the kind of night when silence feels heavy, like it knows something you don't. I was in the kitchen, rinsing a glass, when I heard her voice from the living room. Soft, almost whispering, but the words cut through me like glass. I can't stand being around him anymore. She was on FaceTime with her friend, a woman from her yoga class. The one who always smelled like Bath and Body Works candles and spoke like life was a self-help podcast. My wife, Emily, laughed after saying it, a light, effortless laugh. Then she added, "He's just there, like furniture." I stood frozen. That one sentence rewired something in me. For years, I thought our silence meant peace. Turns out, it meant distance. She didn't see me in the doorway. I didn't confront her. I just watched. She scrolled through Amazon while talking, added something to her cart, and said she might meet someone from work for coffee tomorrow. The way she said it, like it didn't matter if I knew, told me everything. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay next to her, feeling her breathe, feeling the space between us grow wider with every exhale. In the morning, she left early, wearing the gray Lululemon hoodie I bought her last Christmas. No goodbye, no glance. I drove to work, but I didn't stay long. I couldn't focus. Her words looped in my head, couldn't stand being around me. I thought about every time I tried to make things easier, quieter, better. The small things, fixing the porch light, bringing her Starbucks after her long shifts, letting her vent about her boss. I thought I was being steady. She thought I was invisible. That afternoon, I checked her phone bill. 2 numbers she called daily. One I knew, her best friend. The other, not familiar. I didn't look it up. I just saved it in my mind. That night, when she came home, she didn't notice the difference in me. I made dinner. She scrolled through Netflix, barely speaking. She said she was tired and went to bed early. I stayed up, staring at the muted TV screen. That's when the decision hit me. Calm, almost peaceful. If she couldn't stand being around me, I'd give her what she wanted. The next morning, I left before sunrise. No note, no message. I took my Ford F-150, a few clothes, and my passport. I turned off my phone. I didn't even look back at the house. For the first time in years, the silence felt clean. By noon, I was gone from her life completely. And I knew, the moment she realized I wasn't coming back, everything would start to unravel. 2 days passed before she realized I was gone. I know because I watched her through the security cameras I'd set up months ago, the ones she never bothered to learn how to use. She came home from Target with grocery bags and a coffee from Starbucks in her hand. She set the bags down, looked around the quiet house, and called my name once. Not loud, just uncertain. Then again, louder this time. I watched her walk through every room like she was expecting me to pop out and explain myself. But the garage was empty. My Ford F-150 wasn't there. My phone was off. My credit cards were disabled. Her confusion lasted about 15 minutes before the panic set in. She called me 6 times that evening. Then my mom. Then my coworker. The next morning, she sent a text that said, "Where are you? This isn't funny." I didn't reply. She didn't know it yet, but the version of me she could reach no longer existed. I had rented a small cabin near a lake 2 hours away, a place I used to go fishing before we got married. It had no Wi-Fi, just a view of still water and silence thick enough to feel in your chest. For the first time in years, I could think without being interrupted by notifications, by her sighs, by the sound of her scrolling. The first few days felt strange, like detox. I'd wake up expecting her voice, her movements, her perfume. But then, slowly, something shifted. I started eating when I wanted, sleeping when I wanted. The world shrank to something small, manageable, almost peaceful. Meanwhile, I knew she was unraveling. On the 4th day, I turned my phone on for 5 minutes, just enough to see dozens of messages. Her tone changed from irritation to fear. "Please, just tell me you're okay." Then softer, "I didn't mean what I said." Then, finally, "I can't sleep. Please come home." I didn't respond. Instead, I scrolled her Instagram. A new photo, just a cup of coffee, the caption, "Some silences are louder than words." I almost laughed. She was still trying to control the narrative. But this time, I was no longer part of her story. That night, I sat outside by the fire, the stars reflecting on the lake. For the first time, I understood what peace actually felt like. Not comfort, not numbness, but clarity. I wasn't gone out of anger. I was gone because she needed to see what life looked like without me holding it together. And I knew, deep down, she was starting to understand that too. On the seventh day, I saw the first real proof. It wasn't a message or a call. It was movement. She had transferred money from our joint account to her personal one, the one I wasn't supposed to know about. Small amounts at first, then larger. I'd set up alerts months ago when I noticed late-night charges on our statements, hotel stays, coffee shops, Uber rides that didn't match her schedule. At the time, I'd convinced myself she was just stressed, maybe seeing friends. But now, I saw the pattern for what it was. There was someone else. I didn't rage. I didn't even feel shock. Just a cold, still understanding. Like I'd finally reached the last page of a book I'd been pretending not to read. I traced the payments, followed the trail. One name repeated often, Aaron. I remembered her mentioning him once. A new guy in the marketing team, she'd said, brushing it off like nothing. I knew where to look next. Her emails were synced to our shared laptop. I hadn't opened them in months. But that morning, sitting in that cabin with the light cutting through the blinds, I did. The first thing I saw was a message from him, sent at 2 a.m. It wasn't explicit, but the intimacy was there, words that didn't belong to colleagues. He wrote, "You deserve to be seen." She replied, "I finally feel like someone notices me." I stared at those sentences for a long time. Not out of jealousy. I was long past that, but because they revealed something deeper. I'd spent years trying to make her comfortable. He made her feel visible. That's when I realized, people don't always leave because of what's missing. Sometimes they leave because they outgrow the version of themselves they see in you. Still, I wasn't planning revenge. I didn't need to destroy them. They'd do that on their own. I just wanted the truth, clean, undeniable, documented. By the next day, I had it all. Photos, messages, financial logs, every thread connected. But I didn't confront her. I didn't post anything. I didn't even tell a soul. I simply archived everything and backed it up. Then I turned off the laptop and stared at the lake again. That night, I deleted my social media completely. My absence became absolute. Back home, she posted another photo, a Target candle flickering beside an empty glass of wine. The caption read, "You never realize how quiet a house can be." She didn't know I'd seen it. She didn't know I was watching her world fall silent, just as mine had once done. And I wasn't planning to return. Not yet. She had to sit in that silence long enough to understand what she'd lost. By the 10th day, I was already a ghost. Not officially missing, just gone enough for people to start whispering. Her coworkers began asking if everything was okay. I know because one of them, a friend of mine from before we met, texted me privately. "She's not doing well. You should call her." I didn't answer. She didn't need me to call. She needed to face the echo she'd created. That morning, she went to work like nothing had happened. But something was different. The way she checked her phone between meetings, the way her eyes darted every time it buzzed. I saw it all through her reflection in the security feed I still had access to at home. She looked haunted. Every time she walked past my empty chair in the living room, she hesitated, like expecting it to move. She called again that night, 12 missed calls. Then one voicemail. Her voice cracked halfway through. "I don't know what you're doing, but please, just tell me you're alive." I didn't delete it. I replayed it once, then shut my phone off again. It wasn't cruelty. It was control. I wanted her to feel the kind of uncertainty I'd lived with for months. The kind where every silence means something, and you start to realize it's not just distance. It's consequence. Meanwhile, I began rebuilding quietly. I reached out to old friends, started running again, even applied for a job in another city. Every morning, I'd drive my Ford F-150 into town, grab a black coffee from Dunkin', and plan my next move. I wasn't running away anymore. I was choosing distance on purpose. A week later, the financial thread I'd been following led somewhere unexpected. Aaron, the man she'd been messaging, wasn't just another guy from work. He was her manager, and he wasn't single. I found out through a public LinkedIn post tagged with family photos. A wife, 2 kids. I didn't send it to her. I didn't have to, because that same evening, she called one last time, her voice shaking, desperate. "You knew, didn't you?" she said. "You knew all along." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She'd figured it out. The truth always has a way of finding daylight. As I watched the sun go down behind the lake that night, I realized something I hadn't felt in years: relief. Not victory, not revenge, just the quiet satisfaction of no longer needing to prove anything. She had built her own trap. All I did was step aside. By the third week, her silence became louder than her calls ever were. She stopped posting. No new photos, no stories, no quotes pretending everything was fine. The world she'd built on display, polished, curated, performative, just froze. That's when I knew the damage had settled in. But something unexpected happened. Her world started to crumble from another side. Not from me, but from him. Aaron's wife had found out. I didn't have to move a finger. It unfolded on its own. Word spread through the office like wildfire. Someone leaked the emails. Someone else shared screenshots. Within days, HR got involved. The man she'd chosen to feel seen by suddenly stopped showing up. I heard about it from the same coworker who'd texted me earlier. He said, "It's bad. People are talking." Then after a pause, "She looks destroyed." I didn't feel joy, just distance. It was strange watching everything collapse exactly as I'd imagined, but feeling no need to participate. I'd become invisible, but somehow, everything I'd left behind was reacting to my absence. That's when I realized how powerful silence can be. It forces people to face themselves. One afternoon, I drove back into the city. Not to see her, just to watch from afar. I parked across the street from her office building. She came out late, wearing the same gray Lululemon hoodie, her hair tied up carelessly. She looked smaller somehow. Fragile. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. She sat in her car for 10 minutes, just staring at her phone. Then she started crying. The kind of crying you don't do for someone who's gone, but for the person you became while losing them. I watched for a few seconds, then drove away. Back at the cabin, I made coffee and sat outside. The air was cold, but calm. I thought about how much I'd changed. There was a time when I would have rushed to comfort her, would have tried to fix it all. Now I just let it be. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood that love without respect is just dependency disguised as devotion. That night, a new voicemail came in. Her voice was quiet this time. "I understand now. I really do." She paused, breathing unevenly. "You were the only one who ever stayed. Even when I pushed you away." I didn't delete it, but I didn't reply either. Some lessons only sink in when no one answers back. By the end of that month, the silence had turned into something permanent. I thought she'd move on, find someone else to fill the space I left. But instead, she began to shrink inside it. Every trace of control she once had gone. Friends stopped calling. The same people who used to envy her life now avoided her. She was the story everyone whispered about in break rooms, the one who traded comfort for chaos and lost both. I never spoke to anyone about what I saw, but I kept watching. Through her public accounts, I could see the unraveling in real time. Her posts changed. The bright filters faded. Her captions turned into apologies wrapped in poetry. "Some mistakes can't be undone," one said. Another simply read, "He didn't leave." I pushed him away. One evening, she went live, something she hadn't done in months. I wasn't supposed to see it, but the internet has its ways. She looked tired, sitting in dim light, a half-empty glass beside her. She said she'd made choices that destroyed something pure. Then she smiled weakly, the kind of smile that hides panic. And then she said my name, quietly, almost as if testing whether it still had weight. I closed the screen. I didn't need to hear the rest. The next morning, I went into town and met with an old friend I used to work with. He mentioned that people at her office had started avoiding her, even the ones who'd been close. Her boss, trying to protect the company's image, had quietly shifted her to remote work. I didn't react. I just nodded, sipping my Dunkin' coffee, pretending not to care. But deep down I did, just not in the same way. I no longer wanted to save her. I wanted her to grow through the wreckage she'd built. A few days later, she sent one final message. Just 5 words, "I wish I'd seen you." That line stayed with me. Not because it was emotional, but because it was the first honest thing she'd said in a long time. I didn't respond, but I kept thinking about it. The way people only start seeing clearly when the person they took for granted stops being visible. By then, my peace wasn't a performance. It was real. I had built a new routine, a new rhythm. Early mornings by the lake. Long drives. Quiet evenings. The kind of life that didn't need validation or noise. And that's when she showed up, unannounced, uninvited, and unprepared for who I'd become. It was a cold morning when she appeared at the cabin. I heard the crunch of gravel before I saw her. She stood by my Ford F-150, wearing that same gray Lululemon hoodie, her hair damp from the fog. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. She looked thinner, her eyes hollow in a way I hadn't seen before, not just tired, but emptied. I didn't invite her in. I just stood there on the porch, holding my coffee. She said my name softly, like she wasn't sure she had the right to use it anymore. Then she whispered, "You really disappeared." I didn't answer. I just nodded once. The silence between us stretched out, heavier than any argument we'd ever had. Finally, she said, "I didn't know how bad it would feel." Still, I said nothing. She tried to smile, but her voice shook when she added, "Everyone knows. About him. About everything." Then she looked away, embarrassed. "He's gone. They fired him. His wife," she called me. Her voice broke a little. I deserved it. I didn't flinch, because the truth was, I wasn't angry anymore. Anger requires attachment. I had none left. She kept talking, something about wanting to explain, about mistakes and second chances. But her words felt distant, like echoes from another life. When she asked if I could ever forgive her, I looked at her for the first time in months. Not with hatred, not with pity, just quiet understanding. She wasn't the same woman I'd loved, and I wasn't the same man who once begged to be seen. Instead of answering, I turned and walked inside. She hesitated for a moment, then followed. Inside, the air smelled like burnt coffee and pine wood. The cabin was bare, no photos, no signs of shared memories. Just silence and order. She looked around slowly, then said, "You really started over." I nodded again. "Yeah," I finally said, my voice steady. "I had to." She sat down, her hands trembling slightly. "I thought you'd hate me." I took a breath. "I did," I said quietly. Then I stopped caring. "That's worse." For a moment, she didn't move. Then she whispered, "I know." The silence that followed wasn't bitter. It was honest. The kind that comes after everything has already been said without words. She stayed there for hours, barely speaking. When she finally left, she looked back once, the same way she never used to before. And for the first time, I realized she wasn't chasing forgiveness. She was chasing the version of herself that had disappeared with me. She came back 3 days later. This time, she brought groceries from Walmart and 2 coffees from Dunkin', like nothing had changed. But everything had. I didn't ask her to stay, yet she unpacked the bags quietly, placing things where they didn't belong. She was trying to rebuild something that no longer existed, piece by piece, pretending routine could replace trust. I watched her move around the kitchen, nervous, careful. Every small gesture told me she knew she was no longer in control. The woman who once called me convenient now stood there waiting for permission to exist in my space. When she finally sat down across from me, her hands were shaking. She started talking again, but I barely heard her words. Something about therapy, forgiveness, starting over. It sounded rehearsed, like lines from a book she hoped I'd believe. But behind it, I saw something raw. Fear, regret, maybe both. I stayed silent for a while. Then I said, "You don't get to come back to peace after setting fire to it." She nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "I know," she whispered, "but I had to try." For the first time since I'd left, I felt something other than distance. Not warmth, but recognition. We were 2 people standing in the ruins of something we both built and broke. The difference was, I'd already learned to live among the ashes. She hadn't. I told her I didn't hate her, that I'd stop trying to make sense of her choices, that I'd let go not to hurt her, but to protect what was left of me. She cried quietly, and for once, I didn't stop her. She needed that silence to do what words never could. Later, she asked if I was happy. I said I didn't know. Happiness wasn't the point anymore. Peace was. She stayed until sunset. When she left, she didn't ask if she could come back. She just said, "I'll be around, if you ever want to talk." I didn't answer. That night, the cabin felt different. Not heavy, not cold, just neutral. I realized something important. I didn't need closure from her. The silence itself was the closure. Outside, the lake was still. The world didn't owe us reconciliation, only understanding. And maybe, for the first time, She finally understood what I'd meant all along. That love isn't about staying. It's about being worth returning to. A week passed before I heard from her again. She didn't come to the cabin this time. She just sent a message. I've been thinking about everything. I didn't reply. Some things aren't meant to be discussed through words. They're meant to be lived through silence. But that night, I saw a change. She had deleted every trace of her old life. The filtered smiles, the fake captions, the photos where she tried to look untouchable. In their place was one simple post, a picture of the lake. My lake. The caption read, "Some places teach you what people can't." That hit me harder than I expected. The next morning, I drove into town to clear my head. Dunkin' coffee, quiet streets, no noise. But as I watched the steam rise from the cup, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not even disappointed. She had finally done what I'd hoped for, stopped running from herself. That evening, she showed up again. No groceries this time. No rehearsed words. Just her. She looked calmer, steadier. The chaos in her eyes was gone. She sat across from me on the porch, staring at the water. "You don't owe me anything," she said quietly. "I just wanted you to know I see it now. What I did. What you carried." I didn't interrupt. She kept talking. Not in defense, not begging, just truth. She said she'd spent weeks trying to understand why I didn't explode, why I didn't humiliate her like she might have done in my place. Then she said, "I think I finally understand. You didn't need to win. You just needed peace." I nodded. That was all I'd ever wanted. She smiled, faintly, like someone who finally understood the ending of a story she'd misread for years. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You became the man I used to pretend you were." It wasn't an insult. It was confession. When she left that night, I didn't stop her. She didn't ask if I wanted her to stay. We both knew this was the balance we'd been avoiding. Two people who had nothing left to prove, only lessons left to live. As her car disappeared down the road, I felt no emptiness, no loss. Just calm. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end. It was the pause before the truth settled in for good. It had been almost 2 months since the day I left home. Life had grown quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't ache anymore. The lake became my calendar. Mornings marked by fog, evenings by reflection. I'd built something steady, something simple, and I thought that was the end. But life never ends where you expect it to. One Saturday morning, I drove into town. The sun was bright, the air sharp. I stopped by Dunkin', like always, and saw her car parked outside. For a moment, I almost turned around. But then she stepped out, holding a cup, and saw me. No hesitation, no panic, just stillness. She walked over slowly. There was no makeup this time, no polished version of herself. Just Emily, the woman beneath all the noise. She smiled faintly and said, "I didn't think I'd see you here." I told her I came every weekend. She nodded, like that made sense somehow. Then she said something that stayed with me. "I'm not asking you to come back. I just wanted to thank you for not saving me. I needed to fall." There was no bitterness in her voice, only clarity. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, I saw peace in her too. Not because she got me back, but because she finally found herself in the silence I'd left behind. We sat on the bench outside, drinking our coffee without saying much. The kind of silence that once suffocated us now felt like understanding. When she finally stood to leave, she turned to me and said, "You were always enough. I just wasn't ready to see it." I didn't reply. I just watched her walk away, not as an ending, but as something cleaner, lighter. That night, back at the cabin, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the distance, the unraveling. But none of it felt like loss anymore. It felt like transformation. Two people breaking apart so they could finally see themselves clearly. I didn't bring her back into my life. But I didn't shut the door either. Some stories don't need revenge or redemption. They just need stillness. Before bed, I wrote a message and left it unsent. Sometimes you have to disappear so the other person can find what they lost, and so can you. Then I deleted it. The next morning, I woke to the sound of birds, the lake perfectly still, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like something was missing. I wasn't her shadow anymore. I was just free. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.